Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks, and here are the top stories of the hour. President Vladimir Putin says the onus is on the West to provide Russia with the security guarantees it seeks so that Russia, in turn, can determine Moscow's future actions. In the latest blow to freedoms following crackdowns by China, Hong Kong University dismantles its Tiananmen statue commemorating those killed by Chinese troops around the square in 1989. Chinese officials say there is a high probability of COVID-19 outbreaks inside the Winter Olympics bubble, but they say they've drawn up emergency plans. China shuts down a city of 13 million people in a bid to extinguish a small COVID-19 outbreak and chase its zero-case goal. And the US Navy seizes 1,400 AK-47 rifles and ammunition from a fishing boat it claims was smuggling weapons from Iran to Houthi rebels in war-torn Yemen. We begin today once again with the big question hanging over the world as 2021 hurtles to its end. Is Russia getting ready for war in Ukraine? There remains a substantial build-up along Russia's border with Ukraine of forces, but Vladimir Putin continues to insist Moscow doesn't seek conflict. The Russian president says he wants to avoid any violence with both Ukraine and the West. Last week, Russia presented the West with sweeping security demands, saying that NATO must not admit new members. Moscow says Ukraine joining the military alliance would be a red line. The other key demand was for the United States to stop establishing new bases in former Soviet republics, now independent states. For Russia, the onus is on the West. It must provide Moscow with security guarantees to avoid confrontation. So what does the US think about these proposals? Washington says that it is willing to discuss some of them, but it calls several of the Russian demands unacceptable. The US also insists that European allies must be part of any dialogue. President Putin reads the US willingness to discuss his demands as a positive sign. Russia says Washington is ready for talks in Geneva, possibly as early as January. The Russian leader says representatives from both sides have already been selected for the talks.
In Ukraine and not to expand the NATO military alliance.
In this regard, I would like to underline that in general we have seen a positive reaction so far. Our American partners tell us they are ready to start this discussion, these talks, in the very beginning of the next year in Geneva. Representatives from both sides have already been appointed. I hope the development of the situation will proceed along that path.
Tensions have been slowly building over Ukraine since mid-November when Washington sounded the alarm over the massive Russian troop buildup. The Biden administration warning its allies they feared Putin was planning an invasion. The Kremlin, on the other hand, claims it is impossible to have relations with the Ukraine government because President Volodymyr Zelensky is under the influence of radical forces.
Теперь с ними отказываются просто разговаривать. Объявляют их террористами и говорят, разговаривать с ними не будем.
They simply refuse to talk to these people. They call them terrorists and say they won't talk to them. Tell us why. Because instead of meeting people's needs in peace and using this mood in the Ukrainian society, President Zelensky came to power and instead of meeting the needs, got under the influence of radical nationalistic forces, just like the previous authorities.
Под влияние радикальных элементов.
Vladimir Putin, of course, was once a KGB agent during the Soviet era. He has described the USSR's collapse, which took place exactly 30 years ago this week, as the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. The conflict centres around Moscow's uneasiness, even now with Ukraine's independence. When Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, it was a turning point, the beginning of the undeclared war between the two sides. Time is running out to revive the Iran nuclear deal. Leaders from Tehran and the West will huddle once again in Vienna, attempting to save the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA. Russia's top envoy to the talks made the announcement via a tweet, Mikhail Ulyanov, saying that the timing of the talks shows that negotiators don't want to waste time and continue to seek the speediest restoration of the JCPOA. Representatives from China, France, Germany, Russia, Britain and, of course, Iran will take part in the high-stakes talks. Speaking on the upcoming meeting, Enrique Mora, the EU diplomat chairing the negotiations, said it is important to pick up the pace on key outstanding issues, move forward and work closely with the United States. Highlighting the urgent quest for a solution, US negotiator Rob Malley warned of a period of escalating crisis if diplomacy fails to restore the agreement. While world leaders are making last-ditch efforts to save the Iran nuclear deal, Israel is not on their side. It has for long opposed reviving the agreement, and on that note, Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett held a meeting with US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in Jerusalem. Sullivan's visit to Israel comes at a critical time. Amidst a lack of progress on returning to the original pact, he called for the US and Israel to develop a joint strategy. Sullivan underscored the US administration's determination to confront all aspects of the threat that Iran poses, and he reaffirmed the US commitment to ensuring that Iran never acquires a nuclear weapon.
Profound ramifications for the stability of the Middle East
and I bring personal greetings from President Biden and from Dr. Biden, who wanted me to extend to you their warm wishes. And they asked me to come here this week, even just before Christmas, because at a critical juncture for both of our countries on a major set of security issues, it's important that we sit together and develop a common strategy, a common outlook, and find a way forward that fundamentally secures your country's interests and mine. And we believe those interests, like the values upon which our countries are built, are deeply shared and deeply felt.
Israel is not a party to the Vienna talks, but it has been critical of attempts to reach a new deal with Iran, even threatening to use military force, if necessary, to prevent Iran from gaining the means to make a nuclear bomb. Referring to the negotiations with Iran, Bennett told Sullivan that any conclusion struck during the Vienna meetings will have a long-term impact on the entire Middle East region.
These days are pretty important. What happens in Vienna has profound ramifications for the stability of the Middle East and the security of Israel for the upcoming years, and that's why it's such a timely meeting.
The 2015 deal saw Iran agree to curb its nuclear activities in exchange for sanctions relief. Negotiations to restore the pact resumed in November, Washington was party to the original agreement, but of course withdrew under President Donald Trump 3 years ago. Western powers say Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium could be used to develop a nuclear weapon, but Iran insists it only wants to develop a peaceful civil nuclear program. Naftali Bennett's government wants global efforts to revive the accord halted. He has accused Iran of nuclear blackmail, and he's argued the revenues gained by Iran from any sanctions relief that is granted would be used to acquire weapons to harm Israelis. Israel's President, Isaac Herzog, has alluded to the possibility of striking Iran militarily. In his latest remarks, Herzog said the Iranian nuclear threat must be neutralized once and for all, with or without an agreement. Our correspondent Jody Cohen talked to Galia Levy, who is the coordinator of the Israel-China program at the Institute for National Security Studies. Levy spoke at length about the former Mossad director's claim that China is the only country that can salvage the nuclear talks.
And former Mossad director Ephraim Halevi has suggested that China could be the only country that can bring about agreement on the nuclear talks with Iran in Vienna. The Iranian economy relies most on China, and China has been critical of US sanctions. Do you think China can and will impress on Iran a solution?
Well, these are two questions. Can and will are two different questions. If it can, probably it has some influence on Iran. If it will, probably not. China has no incentive to interfere in this matter. It's not her way to do business. Certainly not if it needs to be on the same side with the US. The Iranian and the Chinese are taking the Iranian side against the US. So for China to join the US and influence Iran to go to an agreement, I can't see that coming. They can a little bit make some pressure on Iran. I don't think that they really want to do that.
Now, it is the will he or won't he question that will dominate American politics until it gets a clear answer. And you can ask it of two men here, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. After almost a year in the Oval Office, the US president was asked yesterday about his plans to run for re-election. Here's what he had to say.
Yes, but look, I'm a great respecter of fate. Fate has intervened in my life many, many times. If I'm in the health I'm in now, if I'm in good health, then in fact, I would run again.
And if that means a rematch against Donald Trump?
You're trying to tempt me now. Sure. Why would I not run against Donald Trump or even the nominee? That would increase the prospect of running.
Biden was speaking there in an interview with ABC News. Donald Trump is still dangling the prospect of a rematch in 2024. Trump and Biden, of course, rarely agree, but the two political rivals did find common ground this week on the issue of booster shots. In that same interview, Biden not only praised his former opponent for taking a COVID-19 booster, but also gave his administration credit for the development of the vaccines. Biden thanking the Trump administration and the scientific community, saying that America was one of the first countries to get the vaccines as a result of their work. And he gave the credit to the Trump administration. Biden appreciating Trump is not something that happens every day here. Here's how Donald Trump reacted. During an interview on Fox News, the former president said, "I was surprised to hear it. I think it was a terrific thing, and I think it makes a lot of people happy." A famous statue marking the Tiananmen Square massacre has been removed from the University of Hong Kong. It was dismantled in an overnight operation inside Hong Kong's oldest university. The 8-metre-high sculpture, known as the Pillar of Shame, commemorates the pro-democracy protesters killed by Chinese authorities in 1989.
A famous statue commemorating the lives lost during China's Tiananmen Square crackdown has been removed from Hong Kong University. Late on Wednesday night, security guards placed yellow barricades around the 26-foot-high copper sculpture called the Pillar of Shame. The artwork is one of the few remaining public memorials in the former British colony to remember the bloody crackdown in 1989. It features anguished human torsos to represent the pro-democracy protesters killed by the Chinese authorities. The Tiananmen incident remains a taboo subject in mainland China, where it cannot be publicly commemorated. Several months ago, the university sent a legal letter to the custodians of the statue, asking for its removal. In a statement, HKU said that no party had ever obtained approval to display the statue on its campus. It also called the statue fragile and said it posed potential safety issues.
I'm the owner of the statue.
But the Danish sculptor behind the piece has hit out at the institution. Jens Gauschutt said in a statement he was totally shocked at the move against his private property and that he would claim compensation for any damage to the sculpture. The removal of the statue is the latest step targeting people or organisations affiliated with the sensitive June 4th, 1989 date and events to mark it.
Now, extreme weather, of course, became the new normal this year. There was hardly any country untouched by the impact of climate change. In our next report, we're going to take you through the major climate hazards that defined 2021.
Glacial melt. Sea level rise. Wildfires. Droughts. 2021 was the year when climate change hit home. The crisis could not be ignored anymore. Among the first victims of rising temperatures are our glaciers. Scientists have warned that the ice shelf of the crucial Thwaites Glacier might collapse within 5 years. This will lead to a rise in sea levels across the world. The trend is not limited to polar regions. In India, Himalayan glaciers are melting away. These glaciers feed nearby rivers. Now the locals are facing a shortage of water. Then there's the issue of thawing permafrost. We're talking about ground which always remain frozen. Thawing permafrost means the release of methane and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. According to experts, the mires of western Siberia can contain up to 70 million tons of methane.
When the thermokarst process intensifies, organic matter begins to decompose in these lakes, and accordingly, a lot of carbon enters the water, which is then released into the atmosphere either in the form of carbon dioxide or in the form of methane.
Iconic cities across the world are battling coastal flooding. Authorities have been racing against time to build a seawall in the ancient city of Alexandria in Egypt. Its shores are being threatened by coastal erosion. Another fabled city at risk of being submerged is Venice in Italy. Flooding has become a frequent occurrence in the city, famous for its lagoons.
Quindi noi viviamo con questa acqua alta e vedete il disagio.
We live with this aqua alta, and you can see the inconvenience. The aqua alta is a phenomenon. This is increasing more and more. It blocks all of the businesses. Venice lives thanks to craftsmanship and tourism. If there is no more tourism, Venice dies. We have a great responsibility in trying to save it, but we are suffering a lot.
Then there's wildfires. California in the US has been ravaged by a series of wildfires. Nearly 9,000 blazes have been reported this year. Officials have blamed dry weather for fueling the fires.
For the Yurok people, cultural burning has been a way of life for us. Fire is family. Fire warms our homes. It heats our food. It cooks our food. It protects our land. It restores our environment. It brings back food sources for our animals. It brings back plants and medicine and food that we as people use. It helps the trees to get more water to them once you remove that 100+ years of dead and down fuels that has been suffocating them.
there have been disasters, but communities also took steps to mitigate the effects of climate change. In Senegal, in sub-Saharan Africa, the land is desolate and arid. But there are small pockets of greenery. These pockets have been created by the locals. It's called the Great Green Wall.
The whole world is seeing that if we don't preserve or recover the forests, we are heading straight for the edge. So it is necessary today that everyone compromises to rethink this world and the forms of development that until now have been the basis of this massive destruction of nature by man.
Senegal shows that there's still hope and that the planet can be saved from the worst effects of climate change if we act now. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Finally, people in Moscow are being treated to a spectacular display of holiday trees from around the world. The project is called the Gallery of Designer Christmas Trees, and it's a new addition to the Russian capital's traditional Journey to the Christmas Festival. Though, of course, the Orthodox Russian Christmas won't itself be celebrated until early in the new year. We will leave you with the visuals. That is all for this edition of WION Live Broadcast from Washington. I'm Simon Marks. I'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching WION. World is One.
I can say with full confidence that our Christmas trees are the most beautiful in the city. I wish for everyone who does not have a New Year's mood, or who doubts something, or who needs to get some incredible change of emotions, to come here and see these trees with their own eyes.
From our studios live in New York City, I'm Susan Tehrani, and this is WION, World is One.
President.
नमस्कार। दिवाली की शॉपिंग और ट्रैवलिंग से जनता की गाड़ियों पर काफी असर पड़ा है। गाड़ियों पर डेंट, स्क्रैचेस और वेयर एंड टेयर भी देखने को मिल रहा है। लेकिन घबराने की कोई बात नहीं। गो मैकेनिक, भारत की नंबर 1 कार सर्विस ऐप टॉप क्वालिटी कार सर्विसेज पर आपको दे रही है भारी छूट। तो देर ना करें और आज ही डाउनलोड करें।
Book now and get flat 500 off. Go Mechanic.
नमस्कार। दिवाली की शॉपिंग और ट्रैवलिंग से जनता की गाड़ियों पर काफी असर पड़ा है। गाड़ियों पर डेंट, स्क्रैचेस और वेयर एंड टेयर भी देखने को मिल रहा है। लेकिन घबराने की कोई बात नहीं। गो मैकेनिक, भारत की नंबर 1 कार सर्विस ऐप टॉप क्वालिटी कार सर्विसेज पर आपको दे रही है भारी छूट। तो देर ना करें और आज ही डाउनलोड करें।
Book now and get flat 500 off. Go Mechanic.
Joe Biden, now the 46th president of the United States, has a full plate in front of him.
Afghanistan has been the heart of American military power.
In a clear warning to China, India's military has now taken control of the country for 1 year.
Made it concerned. It says that it's likely to misfire. What was happening inside the virology lab in Wuhan?
One ship was able to freeze global trade.
We want love, we want peace, we want equality!
There are a traditional recipe, and it's really very delicious.
It's code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening. Wildfires, floods, and hurricanes. Extreme climate events warn of impending doom. Is the world heading towards a climate catastrophe? Watch WION's Climate Tracker weekdays at 12 p.m. GMT, 5:30 p.m. IST.
You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time.
Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong. We desperately need you to prove us wrong. God help us all if you fail to prove us wrong. God help us.